Hello there, welcome to a special one-off episode where today we're going to look at a project that I've been working on over the last week. For those of you who have missed the weekly live streams, we've been working on a habitat for a couple of animals for a community zoo that I'm taking part in. This community zoo is a project ran by Gunter of Gunter's Gaming, as well as a couple of other Planet Zoo YouTubers, all through Discord. For those interested, I'll pop a Discord link in the description below. Feel free to jump on in and join us. So what is the community zoo? The community zoo is a large zoo where each person taking part can have a plot. Within that plot, we will then build a habitat for one, or in my case, a couple of animals. The plots themselves are split into separate areas, with each area being themed along a continent of the world. In my case, I've chosen Asia, with a focus more on the specific Indian subcontinent. Now, the animal species that I chose was the Indian or Asian elephant, the Asian small-clawed otter, and the Lar Gibbon. By mixing these three species, the idea is that we're going to create a habitat that showcases what happens when three very different species live in the same environment. Now, before we jump on in today, if you're a fan of mixing three completely different species and seeing what happens, hit the like button. If you think they should all be on their own enclosures and really you're not interested in showcase habitats, hit the like button. Either way, today's engagement emoji is going to be the elephant. Pop him down in the comments below for the sake of engagement. Now you've done that, let's jump on into the tour. We're going to start off today entering the main entrance that you would walk into from the rest of the zoo. And with this being the first part of the Asia area, you're going to start off by looking into the Otter Tube. Now the Otter Tube is a way that the otters have to get from their own little sanctuary area through to the main habitat. They can swim all the way through it. It's filled with water, and it's there so that the guests can just sort of get a little bit of a view of the otters moving around. And as you can see there, they look brilliant swimming on through. And at the end of the Otter Tube on this side is their own little sanctuary away from all the other animals in the habitat. We've got this deep pond area that they can have a swim around in, and you've also got a small bit off to the side that we'll see in the top-down view where they can sleep and just have a little bit of time away from the elephants and from the gibbons. Now this whole area that we're stood in is where the guests sort of drop down into the ground a bit, and this was a timed build, and if I did have a bit more time we would likely have developed this area a bit more. Namely, these wooden panels at the back here would have some glass exhibits, but I may take a couple of the learnings from this habitat and build it a little bit more into a very similar exhibit that I want to put into Wildlands. Now this all provides a bit more of an intimate connection into the otters here, and it's a great little starter to the start of the habitat before you take in the main area. Plus these guys are kind of small, so it means you can see them nice and up close before seeing them from quite far away as you're walking above the habitat itself. Now as we go back up, we're going to walk up to our skyway. This big tree on our left here was actually part of the main inspiration from this habitat. So it's built around a attraction based out of Disney in Hong Kong, where they have Tarzan's Treehouse, and that entire attraction has like a walkway suspended off of a big giant tree. I wanted to recreate that, however, I realised that due to the size of the zoo that we're going to be making, the need is there for a much bigger path, and the size of tree I was going to create wouldn't necessarily hold up the path. So instead I built this, which is basically an aquatic sort of rock with the strangler trees set just outside of it. Now as you begin going across the main skyway, you have a little peek over area into the otters' sleeping quarters. Again, not really there to be looked at, that's very much more for privacy for the animal, but you do get a little bit of a peek over. And then you've got two specific areas. You've got the bit on the left and the bit on the right. Now the bit on the right is the main mixed forest area. It's where all three animal species come together. And as you can see here, we're very much in the forest at this point. So you've got that nice canopy feeling. You can't really see outside of the habitat by much. And then over on the left here, you've got the giant pond. And this is sort of an area where the otters exit their tube into. But it's also where the elephants come up to have a swim, and it worked out really well. This was originally going to be quite a bit smaller, but I think it kind of made sense being a little bit larger, given that we've got such big animals in the habitat. Now the fencing that we're looking through here is also inspired by that Disney Tarzan habitat, and is made from bamboo and mesh, and I think it adds a nice rustic feel to the whole skyway. It has to be quite tall so we don't get anybody jumping over or falling in, because it is quite a height in the air. Now over on the right hand side here, this is the main mixed area. You've got the elephant habitat in the back, you've got mud pools, you've got foraging areas. The gibbons and the otters all come over here for food and to forage around. And then further along on the left, we've got our treehouse. Now this is a little area just for the gibbons to retreat to. They get there through various ropeways. They've got some just going underneath the walkway here. We've also got some over on the left coming from a tamarind tree. My original intention was this was going to be a ship that had been washed into the forest and was caught in a tree. Again, did not have the time to make that. We'll more than likely try and make it again in the future. But I think for now, this kind of works. It gives them somewhere to, I guess, sleep and get away from all the other animals. And they're not the most shyest of animals anyway. Plus, they've got all these trees to jump and swing about in. So they actually have the most amount of area from most of the animals in this habitat. Now, the original intention was to have them come up and over the walkway. Again, I was having issues stopping them getting onto the path and just escaping. So for now, they just get to climb and run underneath, but they seem content with that. And then as you can see on the other side of the walkway here, we've got all three species mixing together in the same area. Further up here, we've got our Indian/Asian elephant house and their normal habitat, so the area that they would be in when they're not allowed into the forest. Now, just a little bit of backstory if you've never seen an Asian elephant habitat before. Elephants as a species will destroy plant life, but normally in the wild they have such a large area that they cover that the plants tend to regenerate by the time they pass back through. However, in zoos, what they tend to have, if they have a planted area for the elephants, is limited access. So this bit that we're looking at here would normally be where they spend their day to day, and then the green gate would be closed most of the time. The elephants then maybe once or twice a week at most, depending on how well the area is flourishing and obviously what's happening with regards to the trees in there. The elephants would then be let into that forest area for, I guess, to forage and attack the trees and do what they do in a forest. Ironically, the area that we've got here is big enough by Planet Zoo standards that with the gate closed, it's still okay for 4 elephants. Not really something I kind of agree with, but it certainly apparently works. Now, as we leave this bridge, this would normally take you into another Asian habitat, and that would be dead ahead of us. And then as we come out and turn right, we're well and truly in the Asian area of the zoo. So the idea of the forest edge here is that this is your entry into Asia. But obviously a lot of these habitats are going to end up being certainly more themed, I can imagine, from the animals that have been chosen. So this is kind of like a little bridge, a bridge from, I think we're next to the European and American areas into Asia. So hopefully it does its job by keeping everything nice and covered in. Now, the building that we're approaching here is the elephant house, and I made this on stream, and those of you who caught the stream will remember that I was agonizing over how much I don't like these concrete buildings. I think the bamboo cladding works really well to sort of take away a lot of that concreteness, and the inside I actually really enjoy. I like how all of the wire work and the beams have turned out, so I can't really hate it as much as I did when we were building it. But I would definitely rebuild it in a different way if we had the time and the chance to do so. And finally, as we come around the side here, we're again still firmly in the Asian area of the zoo. So you've got this little window, and this isn't really where you're meant to stand, but the idea is that as you're passing, you could sort of see, oh, there's an opening and a walkway. What I do love about this side is this planted dry moat. It's the first time I've ever filled my dry moats with plants, and I love it. I love how it turned out. I love how it looks. I love the feel it gives. It's definitely something that we will be doing again in the future. I think it looks great. It's not really an area that would ever really be heavily maintained because it's just there to stop the otters and the gibbons getting out. But yeah, the rest of this entire side is just a hill with some planting on, again, just to hide the bulk of the habitat from the rest of the zoo. And then you've just got this little window that just says, oh look, there's a walkway over there, and lets the guests know that there is somewhere for them to go. And with that, that's our walking tour over. Let's jump to the top down and have a look at how we built it. Okay, so from above, as you can see the sort of size of the habitat. Now, this shape here is sort of the mirror opposite of the plot that I used to build the habitat in. And this is kind of how the Community Zoo works. You each get a plot and you fill that plot however you wish. So it was a larger, or one of the larger areas, but as you can probably see from above, not a huge amount of the habitat is actually using that space. A lot of it is vegetation and the border. So I'm really happy with how it turned out and felt that it did sort of give you that idea of a bigger area. So let's pick up a couple of the bits that I'm really happy with. This otter pond is definitely one of my favourite places in the entire habitat. It's so peaceful and serene, and you've got their little hideaway at the back here where they can sleep. They use it really well, so that, you know, there's always 1 or 2 otters having a paddle around in here. I've yet to see the fish feeder go off, which is interesting because it is accessible and it is filled. That might be an issue with the sandbox setup that we're using for this zoo. But as you can see, it's just very, very peaceful. It's a shame you can't see the top planted bit for the guests. The idea originally was to have a platform come out over the top here, over both the top of this and the sleeping area. And that would then give the guests and an educator an opportunity to do like an education talk. Again, a lot of that got cut, but it's something that we could certainly add later on. Now, as I mentioned, the guest area also could have been improved, as well as our tunnel could be smaller. Now, we're going to pause for a moment. I'm just going to run you through the tunnel because I have been asked when I was showing off a couple of previews how we made this tunnel. Now, as you can see here with it removed from the water, it's just concrete put together to make a trench, and then we've used the glass arbor to run along the top. I really, just to repeat myself, I know, but I really wish we had big glass tubes that could just be ran through here. No need for the concrete. It doesn't even have to be a tool. I mean, come on, Frontier. Just give me some glass tube objects that are traversable or big enough that smaller animals could traverse through them. We've got the quokka who had the tunnel toy. I know that's an animation going through an object, but if you just gave us that tunnel a little bit bigger, maybe give us a wood one and a glass one that we could make things from, that would be brilliant. They'd just be more of a universal shape that we could use. As it is though, as you can see here, the tunnel, it looks great. I like it. I like the way the otters use it. I like the fact that it sits low enough that you can see them swimming through it. It turned out really well. I'm really happy with it, and it's one of those areas that I'm just glad worked, rather than trying it didn't work and then having to scrap the idea. The only downside is, and I'll put my hands up to this, I did have to use free build. Unfortunately, there is no way of building this without being able to reduce the glass barriers that hold the water in. Now, right at the back here, we've got more dry moats, and this was the first time I had ever planted dry moats, and I'm really happy how they turned out. They just stop the otters and the gibbons escaping, so the elephants have got these bollards going all the way through. But the planted dry moats is definitely one of the better things that ever come out of this habitat. Especially this side, by the way. The coastal pig face, brilliant little plant for making like creeping vines and weeds. I've never used it like that. I'm going to use it a lot more like that. Really like it. Now, this whole habitat originally started out with the idea of me doing a shallow rock stream. And that comes to life very much under the path down here, where the very first thing we built on stream, in fact, was this dry bed. Say dry, it's got water going through it. And this runs all the way down, meets up with the waterfall coming off from the larger pond, goes all the way through and goes out. Now, this very much bisects the habitat. It's great seeing the elephants and the otters all walking through it. And then you've got the gibbons climbing all over the top of it. It kind of, you don't really see it as a guest, but when you catch it in the cinematics, it just looks wonderful. Now, much of the time building this was, as you can see here, cladding every part of the walkway in timber just to bulk it up. Again, it's something little, but I think if you see it without, it's very noticeable. And then, as I mentioned, we've got this giant tree at the other end there, which I would probably change around into something a little bit more like the source material. Now, another area of the zoo that I'm really happy with how it turned out, although not because of how it looks, is the elephant house. Really hate this concrete building still. That's so much. But what I do like is the barriers and the segregation that we've set up. So this whole area set up so that you can have the females and the male elephants separated with these moving gates that can move about and be pulled closed. It also internally allows you to separate the females. So if you've got a pregnant one, then you can sort of put them one side and have a separate entrance and exit. So it worked really well from all the planning. I think it looks really effective. It is also absolutely something I would do again if I was to do a big animal habitat in the future. Off to the left here, we've got the wonderful cabinets that I made in a very early video on the channel. If you've not seen that, I'm going to link it in the card bit above. It's not my greatest work, but I still really enjoy these cabinets, and I think I'll probably get around to making a couple more tutorial videos in the same sort of vein as them in the future. Now, the one and only downside of this building is that, as you can see here, you occasionally get otters and gibbons just coming in and sleeping in the elephant quarters. It's a Planet Zoo limitation, but it's kind of a pain to have to deal with. Now, the other issue we've got, which you may run into yourselves, is certainly the base game animals with bigger hitboxes tend to have an issue where they are unable to interact or use certain feeders and feed troughs. Now, the solution to this is actually to take the whole habitat out and blueprint it, and then remake the park and bring the habitat back in. That's kind of a problem for this size of a habitat, plus there are other people's habitats already on this map, so it's not really something I have the option of doing. That is also why you don't see any feeding areas. Now, because this is sandbox, it's not the end of the world. They're not going to starve because that's turned off, but as you can see here with this barrel feeder, it's inaccessible where it is, and if we grab hold of it and move it to another location, you'll find once again it just becomes inaccessible again. It's a pain. I don't know a way around it in this zoo, but it's something worth being aware of if you do hit the same issue yourselves in the future. Now, that pretty much concludes our walkthrough here. I'm going to jump over to future me to explain how you can get involved with the next community zoo and what comes next. So there we have it, the product and result of our live stream efforts over the past week. Hopefully you enjoyed the habitat that we have come out with. If you would like to get involved with further community zoos, as well as build challenges and just hang out with myself and quite a few other Planet Zoo creators, click the link in the description below that will take you through to Gunter's Gaming Corner. I had a lot of fun making this. It was a challenge working within such a time frame, and I think we have compromised on a few areas, but at the same time, I think it's turned out exceptionally well. Let me know in the comments below if you enjoyed this episode and if you'd like to see a few more one-offs. I am going to be streaming almost weekly now, aiming for Wednesdays, but keep an eye out on the community posts for that, as I will let you know when I'm going live. If you're not subscribed, make sure to subscribe so that you get those notifications, and don't forget to pop an elephant in the comments below to keep that engagement up. I will see you next week when we return to Wildlands and Lord Horace Colton returns from South America and we begin our first big themed area of Wildlands Zoo. In the meantime, we have the wonderful launch of the Planet Zoo Console Edition on the 26th of March. And for all those who have not yet had a chance to enjoy this wonderful game, I can't wait for you to finally get your hands and start building the zoos that you can imagine. Thanks for your time today, guys. Thank you everybody for your support. Stick around for our 1,000 subscribers special, and I will see you next week in Wildlands Zoo. See you then.